This podcast is a B-Side Collections production. Fertility ain't fair.
That's right.
So let's talk about it. Real, raw, unfiltered, with me, your friend in fertility. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Fertility Ain't Fair. I am your host, Britt, and yep, you guessed it. I'm excited to welcome another special guest into the pod. My homegirl from college. I can't believe we've been out of school for like over a decade. It's really odd, but here we are on, our next phase of life, living in this mid-30s. Y'all, it's a lot in the mid-30s that is happening. Good and things that we did not expect. And so our discussion on this episode was all about the big freeze. We are talking about freezing your eggs and the journey that Ashley went through to do just that, because that is what she wanted to do for the preservation of her fertility. So we are talking about what it takes to get to that point, the decision to do it, what led her to it. We're talking about insurance or the lack thereof, the financials, getting the right clinic, the actual process, all the shots. Maybe you've thought about it, you've heard about it, you've considered it, and you might just need to hear someone else's story to kind of get you in this space. So you know what? I'm ready. I'm ready to do my research. I'm ready to jump back in. I'm ready to, give that clinic a call and see what's going on, or call my insurance and just get the ball rolling. Because at the end of the day, yes, our bodies are amazing and resilient and perform miracles every single day. But, we are born with a certain number of eggs, right? That's a fact. And as we get older, so do our eggs, so do, quality issues. And so if you would like to potentially have a family down the road, why not think about preserving your fertility right where it is today? Because it just gives you options for later. And I think that's such an amazing part of this conversation, is that she felt freedom. She felt the pressure lifted by being able to do this now and not have to worry about, oh my God, I gotta, find a partner or, whoever immediately to start a family, but now I can just be like, you know what? The eggs are on ice, baby. So let's go ahead and jump into this episode of Fertility Ain't Fair. The eggs are on ice. So I am so excited, as I always am, but I really, really am today to have one of my college homegirls hopping into the pod. Fertility Ain't Fair. Welcome, Miss Ashley Freeman.
Hey.
Hey, girl. Hey.
So happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you. I've already thanked you outside of this, but I want to just thank you also on record for one, just being brave enough to share your story. And we're talking about the big freeze today on this episode. So the big freeze and freezing your eggs, and or embryos, whatever that you have going on that you want to freeze, to preserve and have options for later.
Yes.
And when you put it out into social media world a couple months back, I was overwhelmed with just happiness for you, because I just feel like it's one of those things that, as we know in our circles, especially with Black women, like I feel like it's not being discussed enough.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes all it takes is for one person who you may know, right, to do it, to share it. And then I am positive that you got reached out to multiple times, I'm sure, from other girls in, circles of life.
So many women. Yes.
Right?
So many.
And it just really takes, if you were thinking about it, or if you had questions, or if you were scared to discuss it, or maybe you've done it and didn't know who to talk to about. But whatever the case may be, is I'm glad that you stepped up, you did it for yourself. And you were able to share it. So just thank you again for being open and to sharing your egg freezing journey with Fertility Ain't Fair.
I'm so happy to. I mean, I think offline I've told you, like, I wish more people were talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary as hell to put yourself out there, but I
Mm-hmm.
think just knowing what I was looking for ahead of embarking on this experience really pushed me to want to share what my journey was. So happy to do that for sure.
Yes. So let's before we get into that, let's how start every show with a guest is tell me how you define yourself. What are the words or phrases that you use to describe Ashley?
Okay. An optimist, a doer. I'm a get stuff done type of person. A daughter, a friend, a TV enthusiast. That's my job.
Mm-hmm.
And a dog mama. So yeah, those would be the things that so easily, I guess, come to mind.
Yes, absolutely. And so let's get into this journey. So before you get the meds and the shots and before you pay for it and all of that good stuff, tell us the why. Why at 33? Why, at the end of 2021 did you say now is my time to do this for my future?
Okay, so for me, it was kind of twofold. You could just hit on one point. I'm 33, and not necessarily in a place where I'm like trying to have a kid, but know
Mm-hmm.
that I do want to embark on the journey of motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one part of it. The other piece was I got out of a long term relationship at
Mm-hmm.
33.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's kind of like, whoa, I'm getting ready to a little bit of a restart in my life, just kind of taking a different path from what I planned.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to feel that pressure that I think comes along as a woman with age
Right.
and embarking on the journey of motherhood, where it's like, okay, if you're on the dating scene and things like that, I'm like, I want to just be able to organically meet people and not
Mm-hmm.
be going out like, oh my gosh, okay, does this person seem like they make a good dad? Do they want to be a
Right.
dad? So I just want to relieve myself a little bit of that pressure. And that is kind of for me the age piece and the being
Mm-hmm.
single again. Really, it jump started it. Like I was like, okay, I thought about it before, but just didn't. It just
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel necessary. When I was like
Mm-hmm.
32, you go to your gynecologists and they kind of give you the advice that like as long as you're under 35, like you don't,
Right.
they're pushing birth control pills up until I
Mm-hmm.
think that age. And so I was like, maybe I don't have to wait until 35. Like, at least let me start just doing some of the research. And
Mm-hmm.
in doing that, I was just like a little overwhelmed because I didn't know where to start. I didn't
Right.
know who to talk to because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know anybody personally who had ever done this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, it was a lot. But the combo of those two things really is what jump started the process for me.
And so you mentioned like wanting to alleviate the pressure. So do you feel at the end of all this, did you feel like relieved from that pressure of, okay, not baby today, but someday 35 is on the way? Like, do you feel relieved in that you made this decision for yourself?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, okay, the eggs are on ice. So whenever
Yes.
I'm, at a place where this is something that feels like it's the right time for me to pursue,
Mm-hmm.
I can revisit that, whether that is with a partner or as a single woman. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
possible now. I just feel like I have more options and that I
Mm-hmm.
don't have my biological clock kind of working against me.
Right.
So the relief was almost instantaneous. Like once
Mm-hmm.
not during the process, but once I got
Right.
to the end and, got the information from my doctor in terms of what we were able to freeze. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, whew, okay, I don't got to talk about this no more for a good amount of time if I don't want to. And that just felt
Right.
really, really good and almost like empowering that I gave that gift to myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm. That's a good point. Because I feel like there's so much that can be out of our control. I mean, age is what it is. Our eggs are what they are, right?
Hmm.
We're born with a certain amount, but when you're talking about your fertility and preserving it and then having choices and options, this is one area of that journey. Like you said, that you can make that decision on your own and say, okay, I know I want this in the future, but it doesn't have to be now or the next 2 years or whatever it is. And then whether
Mm-hmm.
I have someone or not, I'm still able to make that decision later on in life. And so I feel like that's a really big point that people are talking about freezing eggs or embryos. It's not just about, right now it is really about just preserving and having options for later.
Absolutely.
So that's a really good point. Yeah. So, in doing your research, where did you start? Because that obviously, I think, is a barrier that is hard for like most women to even kind of get over. Is that like you said, I don't know anyone, right? I don't know who, I don't know what, I don't know where to go. So, how did you jump in, and how did you find the right clinic for you?
So for me, the first thing was like once I made the decision that I think I want to do this, I was like, maybe the best way to, I guess, get the ball rolling was to reach out to my insurance company, like through my job. Because one, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't even know anything in terms of what clinics are available. Do I have any kind of coverage? Like
Mm-hmm.
it felt really overwhelming, honestly, because
Mm-hmm.
there was no
Mm-hmm.
set, like, you should do this thing. And then,
Right.
almost like a checklist or order of where
Mm-hmm.
to do things. So, reached out to my job, and they were able to kind of direct me to our fertility, kind of like a help desk, I guess you could call
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I had like a personal, like a nurse who she would call me and say, okay, based on, the coverage you have, which we might get into that a little later, which is not very much. But like these are the clinics that we
Mm-hmm.
recommend. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
paying for them, but these were the ones that were
Right.
recommended.
Right.
And from there, she encouraged me to kind of like, once I had a list of 4 or 5, to look them up, to kind of on my own. Now I'm doing all of this, like compare, contrast the cost, the
Mm-hmm.
location. So that was like the kind of starting point for me. And then from there, like, I couldn't really tell them, like, they all are charging pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any clear differentiator that made me go like, oh my gosh, this is the one.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, what ended up happening in terms of me selecting my clinic, like I said, I did not know very many people who did this, but I knew one woman who did, from
Mm-hmm.
Howard, lived on the
Mm-hmm.
West Coast, and she kind of had recorded her journey. And I remember her mentioning the clinic she used, and I happened to find out they had opened a new clinic in New York. So she's in California,
Mm.
and with
Mm.
that, I was like, well, at least I know one person who used this place and
Yeah.
had a good
Mm-hmm.
experience, as opposed to almost like Googling something and you just getting a list and you're like, okay, I
Right.
don't know anybody who's ever used this before.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really what helped me determine it. Just having one person who I
Yeah.
knew, kind of got to see her process online or via social media, and
Mm-hmm.
her having really good things to say about it. And so I was like, okay, well, I will at least do a consultation with them. And in
Mm-hmm.
doing the consultation, it just felt like a match in terms of the doctor. The clinic was like beautiful. It was close to, or not too far from where I live, which as
Mm-hmm.
you get
That's a big
further
deal.
into the process is very, very, very important because you
Yes.
are spending a lot of time there.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I was just like, this feels good. Um, they answered all the questions that I had, answered questions that, or answered things that I didn't even know to ask, because that's
Mm-hmm.
another thing. Like sometimes it's just so much information,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know what you don't know, essentially.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and so it was nice to have somebody who was like, okay, I'll answer everything that you're asking me. Plus, here's a little extra information. And
Yeah.
that really put me at ease and made me decide to use them. They're called Spring Fertility, here in New York, and they were amazing.
Shout out to Spring Fertility. No, that's good. I think, to your point, like there's no handbook for this. Like there's no There's no, here are the things you should do.
No,
Here's
I
where you
wish there was. There
start.
should maybe be a
Right?
handbook. Somebody make a
There,
handbook.
I feel like if we all came together, we could definitely make one up. But you're right, and like I said, and as we mentioned, like it just takes one person or one woman's story to kind of push you in the direction to at least get some kind of information. But without the sharing or without us knowing, we're kind of left in the dark, and then kind of just walking around feeling it out for ourselves, and that can be super
Yes.
intimidating. So it's already scary as hell. The money is scary as hell. The money is funny.
Oof.
And so, adding to all of that is, where the hell do I start? What do I ask? And, how do I know if this is the right fit? But I'm really glad you found your perfect fit, because that's super important. So back to the coverage though, right? So,
Yes.
so did you find there was some coverage though?
So for me, my job did not cover at all any of the actual egg freezing process,
Okay.
because a lot of places, what I did find, or a lot of places of employment, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
deem this as an elective procedure, So it's
Yes,
like,
that wonderful word.
you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to do this. So because you do not have to do this, we are not
Mm-hmm.
covering it. And
Mm-hmm.
for my job in particular, for just a lot of fertility treatments, before they kick in anything, you have to
Mm-hmm.
be deemed infertile, which
Yeah.
is wild, that you have to kind of get that prognosis before they're willing to cover. So with egg freezing, zero coverage on the actual procedure. So
Mm-hmm.
that was a bummer, because
Yeah.
for I'll speak to where I went. This is a $10,000 procedure, and
Mm-hmm.
$10,000 is a lot of money.
Girl.
Um, so it's like, here I have on one hand the reasons I told you that this now felt so important to me, but then it's
Mm-hmm.
like, this is 10K. Like, is it 10K important? And I think that that's, that is a question that's personal to each
Mm-hmm.
individual who is kind of like seeking this process out if you do not have coverage, and also
Mm-hmm.
just means, and that's a whole nother layer of how this can kind of be a little messed up, that it's not
Right.
accessible to everybody because
Right.
of cost.
Yep.
So nothing for the procedure. I was like, even though I knew they weren't going to cover that piece, I was determined to find, like, if there is anything that they'll cover,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pushing for that. So once I knew that the cover that they weren't going to cover the actual egg freezing, my next thing was like, okay, will they cover any of the meds? Because
Right.
the egg freezing is just one piece of the process
Mm-hmm.
in terms of cost. You have then on top of that the medicine, which you have to order or
Mm-hmm.
have on hand before you even start the egg freezing process.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of a few weeks leading into you having what is called your baseline appointment, you need to have all these meds on hand, to make sure that you'll have enough of what you need to carry you through the process. And then the third piece in terms of cost would be the yearly storage. So you
Mm-hmm.
get the eggs retrieved, now you got to pay for them to stay on ice until you're ready to use them, if
Right.
you ever do use them.
Mm-hmm.
So just taking all of those things into consideration, not only was I overwhelmed with the actual process, I was overwhelmed about the money piece,
Mm-hmm.
because it was just a big financial burden to take on. The good
Mm-hmm.
thing with my clinic is they were one of the few, like in the research that I did, that offered like a payment plan. So I was like,
Okay.
okay, I'm gonna just treat this like another monthly bill that I have,
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
and that for me was manageable,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like, all right, we need everything from you one lump sum, because before you start, you have to pay for the meds. So the meds was
Right.
like, I had to have your medicine money, Ashley. Like that, you
Mm-hmm.
can't, there is no payment plan for that. And then with the actual storage fee, for me, it was one of those things like I'll pay, every year at the top of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So I did find out that my job was going to cover some of the medicine. So medicine,
Okay.
$5,000. So now we had a
Yeah.
15K bill to have the eggs on ice. They didn't cover a lot, but they covered, I believe, out of the 5K, about three. So I was like, I will
Okay.
take it.
I'll take it.
I'll take
Right.
it. I don't know what the different, I don't work in insurance. I don't know what the different
Mm.
codes or things were that made, some
Mhm.
meds covered versus others. What I do know was one of the main medicines that was like the hormone that allowed to help your follicles grow. That was the one that
Mhm.
was the most expensive, and that was
Mhm.
the one that they didn't cover.
Okay.
So I was happy to have some coverage, but I would have
Yeah.
liked to have more coverage.
But I love the fact that you said like I was determined to find something because it made a difference still. That
Yeah.
was, 3 grand that,
Yeah.
unfortunately they took care of. And it is crazy because you think about the word elective, and now I hate that word because I mean, they consider all kinds of things elective,
Mhm.
but I'm just over here trying to preserve my body and
Yeah.
like make life later and like do things proactively, but I'm being
Yeah.
told it's elective, so it doesn't count for insurance. And it's just so frustrating,
Oh,
like,
beyond,
oh my
beyond.
God, it's like, how dare you say it's elective? And even if you are deemed infertile, there are still things that they're saying, well, you might need to do X, Y, and Z first before we'll cover this, or,
Yes, they have a checklist.
they do.
they
They
we
are
don't
literally
have one
checking
for.
your ovaries off a list. Like, no, no, no,
Mhm.
no, no. It's
Yeah.
like, damn. But yeah, I'm glad that you found some coverage and that you did your homework and your research. Because once again, it's just all these barriers to get
You
to
you jump through a lot of you jump through a
a
lot of
lot
hoops,
of
Brittany,
hoops.
and like that
Yeah.
is something too that I
Mm-hmm.
learned in this process that was
Mm-hmm.
like kind of upsetting for me because I had never
Mm-hmm.
ventured on this kind of journey where I've had to. I cannot tell you how many times I was like between talking to the financial rep
Mm-hmm.
at the fertility clinic and then talking to my
Mm-hmm.
insurance, and they're like, okay, well, we only cover this brand, switch me to whatever brand that is gonna, if it's gonna
Right.
do this, have the same outcome, and you're gonna pay for that one, I'll take that one. But
Give me the
so
generic,
much
okay?
of, yeah, so much of it was me like
Mm-hmm.
having to make a million different calls, and it just made, I could see how even something like that in
Yeah.
this kind of process could be discouraging for sure.
So right, so let's go back. So we have all the things. We don't know where to start. We never talk about it.
Mhm.
When we get in there, we may or may not have coverage. It's financial burden. It's a lot of back and forth, but we get to your process. So
Yes.
so let's jump into, okay, so let me first say this. So when you first got all your meds and laid them out, because everyone has those good visuals. I've seen a lot of them now. I can't not wait to have mine of all the meds laid out on the damn table, and it
Mhm.
looks crazy. So how did you feel when you opened your box and laid everything out before you started your injections?
I was just like, "Whoa, this is so much shit." Like, literally, I mean, that sounds so simplistic to put it, but that is probably my first thought. Um, so many things, and for me, it was just like, I don't work in the medical profession, so
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming to be like, am I really gonna be able to do this myself? Because
Right.
when it comes to like the injections and there's a little bit of mixing of meds going on, and I
Mm-hmm.
was just like, oh my gosh, like there's probably like 30 different things here. There's needles, there's caps,
Mm-hmm.
it was a little overwhelming. A
Mm-hmm.
little bit for me also, like I was excited because it made it real that I
Yeah.
had got past all the frustrating parts that we just talked about, the
Mm-hmm.
going back and forth with the insurance, the, researching of the clinics. So the meds showing up to my door made it like, okay, so we're doing this.
Right.
And that piece felt good, but then it
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, so we're doing this. um and for me, that also, it was, and I think, I mean, this makes sense, I imagine, in a process like this, just there are so many emotions, so mixed
Yeah.
emotions, like I'm
Yeah.
excited, I'm scared, I'm a little bit sad that I'm even feeling like that I'm at a point that I need to do this,
Yeah.
but feeling empowered that I'm able to
Mhm.
do this.
Mhm.
So it triggered a lot of stuff for me. But my biggest thing I just remember was like, oh, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to mess this up.
Right.
So making sure I was as well versed as I possibly could be before it was time to put the meds to use.
Because you pay all this money and they give you the stuff and give you the instructions, and it's like, good luck. We'll see you at your next appointment. Like, it's
Yes,
just like,
yes.
how
Here's
is
some
how
videos,
right,
and best of luck to you. You can call a hotline number, and I'm
right.
like, if I'm getting ready to stick myself with a needle, what is calling somebody over the phone gonna do for me? But that's kind of what the advice is that they give you.
Mm-hmm.
I will say they did a good job of like, for me personally, I had a video for every single
Mm-hmm.
injection that I had to
Mm-hmm.
do that really showed, okay, this is how you mix this thing. You want to dial
Mm-hmm.
up the pin to this. Because at first, when you hear somebody just talking that at you, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do this. And I'm a very visual person. So being
Mm-hmm.
able to see it was like, okay, okay, I see exactly what you're doing. Okay, I can do this. Okay, maybe I can do this. Um, and that helped me a lot for sure.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so it's about what, 10 days?
10 days, yes. So they tell you, plan from anywhere from 7 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And the way mine was going at first, I thought it was going to be 7, and then it was 8, and then it was 9. So that's another thing I would say, expect the unexpected. It really is
Mm-hmm.
so dependent on how your body responds
Mm-hmm.
to the hormones, and you don't know that until you start taking them. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not even, you don't know, your doctor doesn't know. Like,
Right.
you're
Mm-hmm.
showing up to these appointments, and they're going off of what they see, and then okay, you go a day or two later, and it's like, oh, I thought I would see more growth, not seeing as much growth.
Mm-hmm.
You now need 8 days instead of the 7 we originally told you. And so for me at first, that was a little frustrating, because you kind
Mm-hmm.
of, with something like this, I'm a planner. So I want you to be able to tell me, like, this is exactly what's
Right.
happening. This is not that kind of process.
No,
As much as
yeah.
you want to be in control and say, okay, I'm going to go on Tuesday and I'm going to be done by the following Tuesday. It's like, maybe you will, or maybe not, and you kind of have to be willing to go with it. One, because on top of just what the process is, you don't want that extra stress of trying to control something that's out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for me, that was, they told me anywhere from 7 to 10 days. I showed up for the first appointment, and in that, found out that I had a fibroid.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's news to me. I didn't know that. Because I imagine, just never came up in any of like my yearly
Right.
visits to the
Uh-huh.
gynecologist.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little off putting, but I also found it in this process to be really cool, just getting to know more about my body in a way that I never had, because
Mm-hmm.
I had I have never been pregnant. I've never
Mm-hmm.
tried to get pregnant. So like, all of this for me was brand new. So she's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, you have a fibroid. It shouldn't really impact the process too much. But
Mm-hmm.
when you do try to get pregnant, that is something you want to talk to your doctor about. And I was like,
Yep.
okay, well,
Yep.
thank you for being the first person to share that with me. And, my
Yeah.
33 years, didn't know that at all.
Right.
Um, Also, in that first appointment, they kind of give you a baseline of
Mm-hmm.
based on what they're seeing, what you can expect. So for me, I remember feeling really optimistic about it, because my doctor was like, you have more follicles than the average person your age. So I was like, oh, I'm going to
Mm.
get a lot of eggs. And
Yeah.
then, or that was in my consultation, I'm sorry. So then when I showed
Mm-hmm.
up for that first appointment, You go when you're on your period. That's a little
Mm-hmm.
strange.
Yep. Yep.
I didn't. That was something else I didn't know. So she's like, "Yeah, you're gonna come in like 2 or 3 days into your period," and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "How's that about to work?" But
Right. Are you
clearly they
sure?
do this. Yeah,
They do.
so they do this.
Yes.
So they've seen it all, I imagine.
Yes.
Um, so when I got there, and they're using just like a small kind of probe microscope to
Mm-hmm.
see inside of your ovaries. I remember my right ovary was kind of hidden behind the fibroid. So
Mm-hmm.
for that side, she was having to do a little bit, more manipulating, which
Mm-hmm.
wasn't painful, was just like a little bit of discomfort.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember being disappointed because what she had told me in the consultation in terms of like the number of follicles I had, my right side was like, my right ovary was being a little lazy. Like it just didn't have as many as I don't know if my period impacted that. I don't know all the
Mm-hmm.
science behind it, but my left, I remember she was like, you have like 11 follicles currently on the left side and 4 on your right. And I was thinking like 4, like it sounds terrible. Um, and so from there, that's when she told me, she's like, so based off of what I'm seeing now, as you get ready to start the injections, it's likely will be able to retrieve anywhere from 8 to 15 eggs. So I'm like,
Okay.
man, I better have close to 15 because like
Like
eight
I need
just
all these eggs.
and eight just felt really low in terms
Yeah.
of, you know, there's so much that goes into it. Like you could have, they can, I guess, essentially retrieve 8, but if they're not all mature, then they don't all get
Right.
frozen. And
Right.
as you
Yeah.
go down in number of eggs, now we're
Yeah.
talking about a decrease, like percentage wise.
Right.
And if those eggs were to later be, defrosted and then
Mm-hmm.
made into embryos, like how many now do we have? Do we go from 8 to, okay, you lose 1 or 2 when you defrost, and then you
Mm-hmm.
possibly, so I started feeling like, well, if I'm doing all this and I like get that low of a number, is it really going to be worth it? So I'm
Right.
trying to like pray my body into like produce as many as possible, produce as many as
Yes.
possible. And
Yeah.
I like to think that my prayers helped a little bit, but some of it was just probably my body responding to, the hormones. And
Yeah.
that was the start of my experience with that. I came home that first day and I had watched all my videos like about
Mm-hmm.
how to do this, and I was kind of scared because I was just like, I don't love needles. Is this going to be
Right.
painful? I don't have
Mm-hmm.
anybody here to help me. Um but was also like, again, I said I'm a doer. I was like, no, but this is happening. Like I'm afraid, but I'm going to do this. And I think for me, once I got past that first night of injections,
Mm-hmm.
it was like, all right, like, it wasn't as bad as what I had imagined it to be in terms of it being painful or anything like that. I was more concerned about mixing the meds the right way.
Right. That's what makes me nervous.
Yeah. But no, like they give you the materials and they tell you to, like, okay, if you're nervous about injecting yourself, maybe have like a partner or a friend do
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, and so I didn't really want anybody else to stick me in the stomach. I was like, if
Yeah.
anybody else is gonna, I mean, if somebody has to
Right.
do this, I think I should be the one who does it.
Yeah.
Um, because I feel like I felt I could gauge better my own body than somebody else
Right.
could.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so then that's what I did. And the first night of injections, like once that went well, I was like, okay, I can do this. The biggest thing after that just became like, it's a time management thing. You need to be injecting every day around the same, give or
Mm-hmm.
take an hour or so around the same
Mm-hmm.
time. So I would have to be like, okay, I have to be home every day around 8 o'clock because that's my injection time. So I can't get caught up at no dinner, doing something
Happy
else.
hour, nothing
Right.
else.
This isn't, I'm making an investment right now. I need this to
Absolutely.
go, to go well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I did that process for injecting every night for about 5 days, maybe 6. And at that point, your body
And in between doing this, I'm going to the doctor every other day and
Mhm.
getting these like, monitoring or having these monitoring appointments,
Mhm.
which were really short, 10 or 15 minutes, where
Mhm.
it's just like the doctor seeing how my body is responding to the hormone. So, she would be like, okay, the left's kicking behind, the right is like need to catch up a little bit. And then I think at one point she told me that my right ovary, like the one that I was calling lazy, started taking all the medicine up. So then the left stopped growing as much. So I
Oh
was like,
wow.
I didn't even know something like that was possible.
Yes.
But you
Yeah.
learn a lot in this
Mhm.
process. And
Mhm.
about 5 or 6 days in, my body is now ready, to start ovulating, because that's what it
Mhm.
would naturally do when you have
Mhm.
these eggs that go unfertilized. But they don't
Mhm.
want you to ovulate until it's time to actually retrieve the egg. So then that's
Right.
when you add in a second injection, which is to stop ovulation. And that one was in the morning. So then, like around day 7, I'm injecting myself every morning and and twice every night. So 3 injections every day.
Mm.
And about 7 days in, it was more so that I was just like ready to be done. I'm like, okay, I've done my due diligence. Like I've
Right.
done the needles every day. Um, I felt like myself. That was something I was worried about, because the hormones impact every person differently.
Right.
And it was the thing that people were kind of scaring me, the little bit of stuff that I was seeing. Like the hormones gonna have you out here acting crazy. And I'm like, please don't, because for a lot of us, you're doing this and you're also still living your regular everyday life. So I'm still going to
Right.
work
Still
and
have
having,
work. Yeah.
nobody knows. A small handful of people knew it was
Mhm.
happening, but at my job, nobody knew it was happening. So
Right.
I'm doing all of these, my normal functional things. So I'm like praying, like, please let me just be kind of normal throughout this thing. And thankfully for me, that was the case. I didn't have a really strong reaction to the hormones. It might have been like once I was a weekend, something happened and I was boohoo crying, and then I was like, maybe this is
Girl.
the hormones.
Maybe, maybe.
Or I'm just having a really crappy day.
Right,
Um,
right.
but outside of that piece of it, for me was fine. The bloating is real. You
Oh my
start
God. When
get
I saw your video, girl, I was like, yeah,
Yeah. I was
yeah.
looking like a little pregnant towards the
And that's the
end.
crazy part. It was like, here I am looking whole pregnant and nowhere near pregnant.
No,
Like, isn't
nowhere near. But
it?
my stomach was appearing as if it were that way. And one of the
Hmm.
reactions, like speaking of pregnancy, that my body did have is I noticed I was having headaches. So like in the
Yeah.
first 2 or 3 days, it's like, dang, my head is hurting.
Hmm.
And, I mentioned it to my doctor, and she was like, oh, well, for you, because essentially in this process, like you are getting hormone levels that you would experience like in early pregnancy. So
Right.
she was like, for you, that might be something that once you are pregnant, at least in the beginning, that you experience. You will
It's like, oh,
probably
good to
be.
know.
And I was just like, okay.
Good to know for my future.
Yes,
Okay.
and they kind of discourage you from taking too much medicine because you don't
Yeah.
want anything to interfere with the hormones. So I would
Hmm.
say maybe the first 2 or so days I had like a really, really bad headache. And then I don't
Hmm.
know if my body just kind of adjusted to the hormone levels. It leveled off after that.
Hmm.
But I was like, okay, well, found out about the fibroid, found out that I will probably like be a person who my head is killing me in the early stages of pregnancy. Got it.
it's it's just so many things. And I think you made the point to say, I just learned my body in a way that I had never experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's scary, it's crazy, it's exciting, it's also fascinating. I think when you're put in the position either by choice or kind of forced into it because you're going through infertility, that you kind of are put in a space to learn so much and learn
Yeah.
how much goes into this thing called reproductive health
Oh my
because,
gosh,
I think
yes.
we're taught it's just so easy. We're taught that, 1+1 equals 1, or 1+1 equals 2, I should say, as far as a baby goes. And like, that all these things just naturally occur and happen. But when you're put into a lab situation, or a clinic situation, they're making your body do all these things to get to the optimal, space for whatever it is. If it's
Yeah.
for egg freezing or if it's for conception, it's forcing your body into do what it does or what it's supposed to do naturally. And for some of us, it doesn't always happen naturally.
Yeah.
But it really is interesting and also like a science project every time I go to the doctor. So it's like, what will I learn today?
No,
Like,
for
because it's
sure.
always something new.
Always. And I don't know. I mean, I think to your point there, some of it is really cool. And then some, because if I weren't on this, if I weren't on this journey, I would have
Mm-hmm.
never learned some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But then some of it is a little overwhelming because
Oh,
it's
it's
like,
very overwhelming.
damn, why nobody ever told me about any of this stuff before?
Period.
The fact
Mm-hmm.
that for some of us, because we, whether, like you said, it be pursuing this at will, like in my
Mm-hmm.
case, or if you are, you've been trying and you end up saying, okay, I need to try to figure out what's going on. And
Mm-hmm.
then to just get this kind of almost like overload of information,
Yeah.
it's just like, I go to the doctor every year and I'm
Mm-hmm.
supposedly there like getting these
Mm-hmm.
checkups, these well
Mm-hmm.
women exams, and
Right.
I'm not, literally, I feel like not being told very much outside of like, do you have a STD or not? And
Do you need birth control or
do you
not?
need birth
Or
control or not?
like,
Like, and that's kind of
mm-hmm.
the extent of it. And then, of course, as you get older, then you're getting more of the conversation of like, do you want to
Right.
have a baby or not? But not anything beyond that. And that just feels
Yeah.
so it feels so
It
surface level.
is. It is. It doesn't even scratch, what we all learn, like you said, in these situations. And I think that's one of my biggest things is that, how do we reach more young women sooner?
Yeah.
Because if it's not going to be, at will from an OBGYN, then it has to be that, this girl is told she needs to ask these different things.
Mm-hmm.
She needs to be told in your wellness checkup or during your annual, whatever it is, hello, am I able to get a check on how many eggs I have in my egg reserve?
Yeah.
These are simple tests. It's a blood test. Like, it's not like this is some surgery or no, get a blood test, check your AMH, and you
Yep.
can find out what is going on. And even to your point, the fibroids, like, I found out I had fibroids years ago now, but it was because I had a cyst that led to them, with the fibroids and led to
Mm-hmm.
other stuff. But once again, you had no idea. And who's to say you would have even known that prior to this, this situation?
Yeah.
And it's not like it's a life or death thing, right? But at the same time, fibroids have a mind of their own. It can grow, it can cause complications, whatever. But now and now you're educated enough to say, hey, on my next checkup, maybe I want to ask about like fibroids or treatment or, how large is it or whatever. You
For
just have more
sure.
options now to talk about it. But those are things that are not being talked about or checked in our annual appointments. And it's just really disheartening that, you get to your 30s for a lot of us, and then you're like smacked in the face with like questions, do this, now is the
Mm-hmm.
time, 35 is the magical number. And it's like, wait, how come y'all wasn't talking about this at 25?
Yeah. Like, where's all the
Like,
information leading up to 35?
right. And as I told someone yesterday, it's not just about, having a child. This is way bigger than, just wanting to have kids or not. I think that's why for so long, these discussions have not been brought to the table, because if I bring it up too early, I'm gonna get looked at crazy, like, oh, you want to have kids now? You need to
Mm-hmm.
do that. No, I just want to have options. I just want to know what's going on in my body. I just want to have
Absolutely.
some kind of control over what is in my future and what, I could look at, 5-10 years down the road. And, it's like taboo to discuss because we think fertility is just about children, but it really is about choices and options and feeling empowered,
Mm-hmm.
to what's happening next. So really hope that by us having these conversations that we can, reach out and, if there's other girls who are in their 20s or in their early 30s, they'll look up to us and say, well, I know so-and-so did it, or I have a, friend of a friend, and we
Yes.
can be that girl that we didn't have.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So I guess I'm trying to wrap up. So what did you learn about yourself in this process?
One of my biggest things was like, again, kind of going back to how I opened in terms of defining myself, is that I'm like a get stuff done kind of person. And with this, turned out to be, different. I knew I didn't have any control over what the actual outcome of like how many eggs that I got,
Mm-hmm.
but I was really proud of myself for something that did start off feeling really overwhelming, like seeing it through to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that was a big feat with something like this, where just like information overload, cost overload, like so many factors I think that could just almost deter you from doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely that was like probably my biggest takeaway. Um, Also, I, kind of learned that I have to be okay needing other people. That's something I'm really working on. And there were
Mm-hmm.
days where it was just like, okay, I want to talk and share, about this experience. And even in the beginning, like I kind of was like, okay, I need to share because
Yeah.
I want to be able to do for somebody else what I was looking for when I was embarking
Yeah.
on this. And that
Mm-hmm.
was scary because, like, yeah, I wouldn't call myself the most private person, but there are certain aspects of my life. Like, if you're not in my inner circle, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
just kind of putting out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think I also learned that too, that sometimes, of course, fear arises for us in so many different aspects of our lives, but my desire to like help somebody was bigger than my own personal fear around it. And,
Yeah.
and I think there's also just so much power in community. And that's why I love, like, even your podcast is just something that is so amazing for women who need to, who are experiencing this, who maybe aren't experiencing it, but just want more information, that
Mm-hmm.
like, we are all often going through some similar or parallel journeys, but often we don't
Yeah.
know because
Yep.
we're silent, whether it's like shame or just, like the fear of putting ourselves out there. And I swear
Mm-hmm.
every time that sometimes we just like, even just share a little bit, then you have
Mm-hmm.
somebody like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, or
Yes.
let me tell you about my experience. And that's really powerful in itself. So that too was a big thing for me
Yeah.
in this journey, for sure.
I completely agree. And so, with that, just saying thank you again for sharing your journey. I feel like, once again, for anyone who's listening who has thought about it, who has, started their research, either they've already done it or they're in process, this was a really good kind of introduction to, what egg freezing could look like. And I think the bottom line is that you mentioned things like not feeling pressured anymore and just knowing so much more about your own body and just having that empowered feeling that you know what you wanted and you knew that it wasn't right now, but you knew that you wanted your options for the future. So,
Yeah.
but how many eggs did you get? We hadn't discussed that. How many did you
Oh
get and
yeah.
how many are on ice, girl?
On ice. So the doctor retrieved 18, and I was like ecstatic
That's
because,
awesome.
originally she gave me the 8 to 15 range. So I was like, oh my gosh, you got 18. And of the 18, 13 of them were mature. And the mature ones are the ones that they actually freeze. So I have 13 eggs that are
Yes.
hanging out, for whenever, if I, do
Yeah.
end up needing them in the future, they
Yeah.
are there and available. So I was really, really happy about that because um, I'm a person who I was like, give me what that means percentage wise, like in terms of an
Right.
actual baby. And she's like, okay, 13 eggs means that you have, I believe it was a 92 or 93% chance of it would result in at least one live birth. And then it was like in the mid 70s for two to result possibly in the future if I made them into embryos or could end up
That's
being
really
two
high.
kids. So
Like, that's
yes,
really
that
high.
felt very, very
Yeah.
encouraging, and hearing
Yeah.
that, after doing 10 days of injecting made me also feel
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this is worth it, because
Yeah.
if I know, pursuing the process of motherhood is something I want to experience in this lifetime, telling me that, like, if I go this route with the eggs, that I have a 90+% chance, I was like, I feel pretty good about those odds.
Yeah. That is amazing. Well, I'm just so thankful. Congratulations. Thank you
Thank
for
you, girl.
sharing. Yes, no, I look forward to seeing more women, like I said, in our immediate or adjacent circles. And, we're
Yes.
kind of in this going into our mid 30s life. And whatever age you are, right? Whenever it's right for you is right for you. But I really hope, kind of our little generation can really be a changing force when it comes to these kinds of conversations. So whether it's right now or if it's for you later, just do the research and find the right clinic, find the right answers, and just know that you are by no means by yourself. There's someone out there who you can find or talk to that probably you may know even who has gone through the journey or can find someone who has to connect with you. So thank you again, Ash. I look
Oh
forward
my gosh,
to
thank you for
just seeing
having
what's
me.
next for you.
Yes,
Yes.
me too. A little pause on this journey, I think, for now, but
Yes.
maybe a resume down the road.
So let me first just close out by saying, I want to just thank Ashley again for hopping in with us, giving us all of the information that someone may need in starting from literally ground zero, not knowing, where to go, where to start when it comes to considering freezing your eggs. And so, and why she did it and that journey to get there. And so, I kind of did a little mini wrap up at the end of the episode, but I'm definitely going to give you my top 3 takeaways as always. So let's hop into it. Number 1, freezing allows you to preserve your fertility and take away the pressure. This is a choice for you to make. It's like self-care in a way, and it's not selfish to say, you know what, I may or may not want a family in the future, but you know what, I don't want to close that door. Let's go ahead, let's do it. And just having that be the option that you make for yourself. Number 1. Number 2, do your homework. That's with anything, but I mean, Ashley talked about how she went to find her clinic, and thank goodness she had someone who she reached out to. They had a clinic in her state in New York, and so it worked out. But doing your homework to find the right fit for a clinic, make sure it looks good, it feels good. And your insurance coverage, if you have any, you may or may not know. Don't ever assume you don't. That was something that my husband and I discovered over the last year. We assumed we did not. And with his new job, we actually did. And then, just seeing if there is not coverage for the procedure and the process. Okay, well, what else could it cover? Could it cover some of the meds? Could it cover storage? I don't know, like whatever it is, like, but do your homework. I love that Ashley mentioned, like, I was determined to find something that they were going to cover, and she did. Because every little bit helps, every coin in the pocket helps. So, the full process, do your homework. And number 3, this is a learning experience like no other. There's no handbook, and everyone's experience and protocol and timing is different. So keep asking questions, but just trust that you can do this. You are not alone. You can do this. You can get through it. Your body is capable. You are capable. But like we said, there's no how-to guide. Of course there are videos and there are resources out there, but literally until you get into it, that's when you find out what it's all about. So, it's a learning process. Trust yourself, trust your body. You got this. So that wraps up this episode. The eggs are on freeze or on ice with our guest, Ashley Freeman. And until next time, follow us on social media at Fertility Ain't Fair on IG and Facebook. Check out our website. If you haven't already checked out our My Fertility Ain't Fair journals on Amazon, do yourself a favor and go ahead and do that. And look, I will catch y'all on the next episode of Fertility Ain't Fair. And until next time, I am your forever friend in fertility. Stay hopeful.